everyone. I am really excited today because my dear friend Pamela Slim is with me for a kind of special episode of She Takes on the World TV. We weren't planning on recording this one, but when I got this beauty in the mail, I knew that we had to do something with Pam for the new year. So here we are. We made it happen. And if you don't already know Pamela, I'm sure many of you do. She was the author of, well, she still is the author of Escape from Cubicle Nation, even though she's got this new book out. It's called Body of Work. And I have to say, I feel kind of connected to the book because she was on our We Mastermind retreat with us as a speaker in 2012 and was writing the book in all of these little stops that we were making in ports, and we would see her up on the Lido deck, and instead of, sitting there with a margarita by the pool, she was writing in a corner overlooking the ocean. So Pam, I love what you've created here. I love that I got to see this before it even came out and hear about what it is. So can you tell us what is, if you could sum up Body of Work, how would you sum it up?
I think the simple way to sum it up is it's really a modern career manual. A lot of what I've seen is, I use career in the broadest sense because obviously you and I work for ourselves and we love that particular work mode. Right. But there also are a lot of creative people who are out there who work for universities or nonprofits or in small, mid, large size organizations. Yeah. And what I found is that, the world of work has changed so much. We have such inherent instability within our economy. At the same time, we have so many totally unique opportunities. For heaven's sake, we were doing a business event on a cruise in the Caribbean where I was working, sitting, underneath a palm tree looking at a beautiful beach, writing my book as you all were working with your clients, swimming in the ocean. And there are so many interesting ways I think that we have to work today. And what I found is that we don't necessarily have well-defined a skill set that's going to give us more flexibility within the world of work as it actually is. So that's what I wrote to fill that gap for Body of Work.
I love that. And you had mentioned in talking about what Body of Work is, you mentioned work mode, which is really interesting. Can you elaborate on work mode? We have chosen a work mode of entrepreneurs and we create. And what are some of the other work modes that people can maybe identify with?
Yeah, there is being an employee of a large corporation. You can be an employee of a university. One of the fun ones that is recently come up is being an internet personality. We find some people who are making hundreds of thousands of dollars with their own YouTube channel, being themselves, doing silly things like drinking and putting makeup on and making, $300,000 a year. Or a lot of these teen, fashionistas who are getting huge brand deals, by working with them. So there's a lot of interesting ways that people are working. And one of the things that I wanted to do with this book, really building on and celebrating everything that I believe from Escape from Cubicle Nation, is that entrepreneurship is wonderful. And for some people, it really is something that does deliver freedom and flexibility and creativity. But sometimes we get so enamored with the work mode. It's simply a way that we choose to work. And working for yourself doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be free. Working for yourself doesn't always mean that you're going to do your best work. Sometimes the best thing you can do, depending upon the stage of life that you're in, is to work for somebody else that gives you the support and the resources to create that which you want to create. And I think in the entrepreneurial world, I probably had a little bit to do with it, creating a site like Escape from Cubicle Nation. But we've gotten so obsessed on the work mode that we forget it's actually about what it is that we are creating. Or what books and software codes and documentary films and movements. A lot of these things are happening outside of the work mode of entrepreneurship.
So are you saying that people need to every once in a while step back and take a look at their work mode and ask themselves if it is something that is contributing overall to the body of work that they want to be creating? Is that something that you think people need to reflect on more often instead of saying, I'm an entrepreneur, I of course need to be an entrepreneur, and then they shut out other opportunities? Are you saying not to do that?
I'm saying not to do it. And I think we have inadvertently, mistakenly created a culture of shame sometimes if people do choose to go back. So sometimes I work with clients who,
You're
some of them
totally
are
right
early,
about that. Yeah.
yeah, some of them are early stage entrepreneurs and they get into it and they realize that it's not at all what they thought. You and I know how hard you have to work, how
Yeah.
much risk you need to take on, and not everybody is really willing or able to do that. So often the feeling they have once they've chosen to leave, because it's so exciting within our circles to make the leap and to work for yourself, is they feel like, oh man, I have to shuffle back and work for somebody else. I've also seen people who have been entrepreneurs for a really long time who decide that want some kind of creative opportunities that sometimes are afforded by going back and taking a role in an organization that might be doing really interesting work, that has teams of people who are highly creative and interesting, and allow them to create on a level that they wouldn't be able to create if they were doing it all themselves. So I think the more we can just look at having a whole range of options that we can choose from and take out any judgment about what's the right one. I've believed my entire life that all work is honorable. We never want to say that somebody choosing to do work in one work mode is less glamorous or less free or less sexy. They're just different ways that we work.
Totally. Yeah. I'm really glad that you said that. And, my sister was on the retreat that you were on with us. And it's funny because my sister is, I hope she won't mind me talking about her for a second, totally awesome. Had done this master's degree and was working within that field, but then her partner, who is in the police force, got a transfer and they ended up moving and she couldn't find something in that field anymore. And there was this little spark in her, very talented artist, that said, maybe I want to try that. But then there's all this outside influence of like, artists never make money. It's so hard to be an artist. There's all these things that you're hearing and external pressure. And so I knew she had to meet Pam. And on the very first day when we met Pam, and Pam was asking her all these questions, and I'm like, this is really good because these are the kind of things that you can't, when it's your sibling, when it's someone you're really close to, you can't always ask them those questions. You need someone else to. And slowly over the week, she decided that even though she thought I was crazy for the longest time for deciding to be an entrepreneur, she decided to pursue entrepreneurship as a work mode, not as a full-time thing, but she wanted to try it as a work mode because of people like you, Pam. And she's been doing that and staying in the work mode of contractor and employee. So she's sort of wearing all of these different hats, and it's been interesting to see how she switches hats and how she's figuring out which one might work best for her. But I do think that entrepreneurs need to ask themselves every once in a while, is this where I should be? Is this what I should be doing? Is entrepreneurship still the right decision for me to make? And all of that is really about the body of work. Now, I want you to talk to me a little bit about the roots, because the roots are really important in the body of work. And then
Yeah.
maybe people are going to start to see the bigger picture of what the body of work is made up of, so that they can start to see how it fits into their own life and their plans that they're making for the new year.
Definitely. So if we think about that, that really the purpose of our life is to create this body of work that we're very proud of, that can be interesting and different and composed of many different things. Often a place that people start is with the assumption of thinking, what is my purpose in life? Like what is my singular purpose? And so once I figure that out, then I'm going to know exactly what I'm going to do. As a coach, I have found that question drives some people absolutely crazy and is often very unproductive, because for some people, they don't feel that there's one singular purpose for which they're put on earth. They do begin to identify that there are certain things that deeply move them. I call them your roots, where you notice that you are really excited by something. So you can be creatively excited, where you notice that every time you see really beautiful visual display or, interior design or fashion, that something happens inside your body and your mind where you just get really excited by it. And you notice that there's something that you're very interested in that's related to really beautiful design. Or for other people, they find it when it comes to social justice. You and I had a long conversation about a documentary project that you're working on that was so moving for me. And it was so interesting to get to know you that way because I've known you as being a brilliant business person. And then I see this side of you where you have spent all this time on a documentary project talking with somebody who's inside a prison and just learning that about you and beginning to see different elements of yourself. I realized that you were driven definitely by story, but also by really understanding at a deeper level what actually moves us as human beings.
Yeah, and I
So,
loved that about our session because I had
yeah,
a body of work session with you and me and you were partners, which was really cool for me because at the end of it we really discovered that I like to tell people's stories. I like to craft people's stories and help other people tell their own stories too. So story was a thing that kept coming up in our session, which was
yes.
fascinating. I mean, you can have multiple passions and things that you like, and you find a way to, as you say, find the thread that ties them all together, which we'll get to after. So continue with the roots.
Yeah. So, I think the process is where you begin to just identify those things that are of great interest to you, that you feel very deeply about. And the reason I like the metaphor of roots is being an entrepreneur for a long time, there can be some real challenges in the creative project. And it's even as you're trying to do one thing. So as you're making your documentary film, as you're writing a book, as you're launching your first product, there are inevitable things that come up and challenge you. And so during those times where you get challenged and pushed and it's hard, that's where your roots really hold you down. And you say, it's worth it to continue to do this because creating this piece of work is going to make the world a better place in the specific way that I care about, right?
Right.
So I'll be helping single mother entrepreneurs, or I will be, really showcasing a different way that we can look at design that'll make people much happier in their lives. Whatever it is that drives you, that becomes something that keeps you going in the inevitable difficulties of the creative process. So in terms of how you discover them, I definitely have exercises in the book for going through and looking, but the main thing just to start to pay attention to is where do you find yourself moved? I had Todd Henry, who's a wonderful person, an amazing author. He just wrote a book called Die Empty. And he came to a live event that I held and he did a talk. And he described it in that, what is that thing that you will lay your body down for and say, not on my watch, not on my watch on this earth am I going to let this go by. I thought that was such a moving way of identifying what may be one of many passions or interests you have that really drive the deeper meaning behind the work that you create.
Yeah, I think that's a great actionable for people to do, especially as they start a new year, to really identify what that is. And I was talking to Terry Cole earlier this week, and she was talking about how, true success is just when you pick that one thing that you won't give up on, that there's no way you'll give up on because you're so passionate about it. And that kind of goes back to what you were saying as well. Like if this is something that you have to bring to the world, you're going to do every single thing that you can to make sure that happens and that that's successful or you're successful in that way. Speaking of success, how would you define success?
Yeah.
In the scope of the body of work. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think this defining your own success is a critical part about how it is that you really manage your career through the lens of a body of work. And by that I mean it's really important to define for you what are the important parts of the way that you do your work so that you know when you have actually reached what you would consider to be success. I personally have a bit of a strange one, which is just enjoying my life while I am living it. That it's very important to me that when I wake up in the morning, being present and feeling alive, feeling engaged. When I look at, for me, what it means to be really enjoying my life while I'm living it, it means that I am doing work that I really enjoy, that I believe in. It means that I am making good time for my children so that I can be an active parent.
Best
it means
kids
that
ever.
I'm going to exactly. It means I'm going to take time to talk to people in line at Starbucks and talk to my neighbors and make sure that I feel good, inside my community. So it's a metric that I can tell right away. I have difficult days. I have times where I go through personal challenges and all that. I still can define that as enjoyment. I call it a full color, full contact life. It's where I'm really putting myself into my work and feeling, at every moment that, what I'm doing is really worth it. And when I notice that I'm really uncomfortable if I have a project that's not working or a difficult situation, it very often goes back to one of the specific roots. Maybe I'm not really doing something with someone whose values align with my values. Maybe I'm doing something that's really not in my strength zone. And so I'm totally stressing over it when I should really make a different choice. So the definition of success that everybody wants to have is totally based on what's important to you. And one of the things I find a lot, especially now that we're so connected via the internet and Facebook and everything, is it's really easy to look at each other's lives and be like, oh, I'm okay, but look at Natalie. Oh my God, are you kidding me? Like, she has it all together, and obviously she has success. Or somebody celebrates, making six figures for the first time in their business, and then they see somebody else who makes seven figures, and all of a sudden they feel deflated. That's actually very destructive to yourself. And I don't care if your goal is to make 10 million, 100 million, or, $10,000 in a year. Right. The important thing is it's actually equated to things that very personally fit what's going to bring you joy and success. And most importantly, allow you to create the things that you want to create in your life.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to always keep in mind, because it's very easy, especially in the online world, to always be comparing yourself to somebody else as well and saying, I started my business around the same time. Why don't I have that yet? Or look what that person's doing. Why haven't I got opportunities like that? But really, if you're diving into this, if you really know your body of work and everything you stand for and what success means to you, you can sort of put your blinders on a little bit and say, I just want to hone in and focus on me and what my body of work is and what I'm meant to do on the planet, because we all have something. And it's just finding it, and we need to stop comparing ourselves always to other people. And I used to do it all the time, and I know people come to me now and they say, I want what you have, or how did you get to where you are? And you seem to have everything so together. No one has everything together all the time. I mean, people think that they'll meet me in person and they're like, oh, it's really refreshing to talk to you, because sometimes I put you on a pedestal and I think, oh, she's so perfect. And I never want people to think that about me. I've realized I just want to, especially now, I feel like I'm more real than ever online. When I'm going through something, I'm like, this sucks. This is what happened today. Or behind the scenes of me, standing in my swampy living room before I'm about to do an event. And I'm like, see, it's not all that glamorous. It looks glamorous on the outside if you're only watching the event, but this is what's happening behind the scenes. It's never what you think it is when you look deeper. So I appreciate that. Now, tell me about the ingredients. So when people have the roots and they can identify their why, what comes next, and what are the ingredients of the body of work?
Yeah, I love the metaphor of ingredients as we look at our skills, our strengths, our experience, because it feels to me like, first, a broad, inclusive way that we look at every component of our life. And I'm a huge fan of every assessment you can imagine, the Enneagram and Myers-Briggs and Strengths Finders. I could never learn more enough about how I'm wired, because it helps to give insight into how to choose effective work. But we also want to include very specific things about our own experience, including the really great times of our life, but also the very difficult ones. I call them our scars. And some of the most profound work that I've seen comes from people that have really come from very difficult situations, that have lived through some really excruciating times. What we often do in our minds is to separate out, oh man, that was such a difficult time, but I just, really don't want to focus on that. Here I have my career, and let me make sure everything looks good, versus taking a total assessment about everything that's happened in our life and to consider them to be ingredients for how we can then put them in different recipes and different work situations where we can be using different parts of ourselves at different times. And at the risk of really belaboring the ingredients metaphor, a lot of times where people struggle with how we present ourselves is many people have many interests and diverse experiences, which makes it feel a bit chaotic, this whole not finding the thread that ties your story together. We've been taught, say, through traditional resumes that you need to include all of your experience and have it all make sense, right? Within the form of a resume. Or when you're introducing yourself on your about page, then you need to tell every component of yourself. I actually see that you can have very distinct ways that you tell your story based on who it is that you're telling your story to, right? So I'm a mom, I'm 47 years old, I have, little kids at home. So if I'm going to be in front of an audience and I'm talking to a whole bunch of moms, I'm of course going to be mentioning that part of myself about being a parent. I'm also black belt in mixed martial arts, and I have many years of love and experience in martial arts. So if
Love
I'm in
that.
front of a room of 25-year-old, young men or people that are really physically active, I'm going to be bringing in that ingredient about myself as a martial artist for what really is relevant. And so when we start to see that, you may realize that you have many, many skills and strengths that a lot of people wouldn't consider as being beneficial. But imagine if you've lived through incredible struggle, maybe you grew up with a really difficult family situation and you got through that and you were very resilient. Imagine if you applied that quality of resilience to the work that you're doing as a consultant. Imagine if you told parts of that story in such a way that would really connect with people. I think that makes your work more powerful. And what it means is we're not segregating different parts of ourselves into different areas because, now more than ever, like we show up as ourselves wherever we go. Even if we want to hide, we can't,
Right.
right?
We don't
Everything is now discoverable.
compartmentalize
Yeah,
like people used to.
right.
Yeah, and this is why I love doing an annual personal self-analysis, which I started doing. I read the book Think and Grow Rich when I was like 10. Um,
Of course you did.
and I read it every year, and I always, I mean, I have a lot more questions that I ask myself now, but at first I started using Napoleon Hill's self-analysis as sort of the annual way that I evaluated how my year was. And what I love about doing something like that is that when you look back, you can really, it's easier to see the common threads looking back than it is at the present moment. And everything that you have ever done prepares you for the moment that you're in or the situation that you're in or what you're going to take on next, which I find really fascinating because I look back on my self-analysis from even 5 years ago, and I look at one of my first businesses was a customer service auditing business. And I helped brands improve how the customer experience was for Gen Yers. And it was difficult to find someone who was in that age group who was capable of taking on this work and actually doing these reports and everything. So I got to do that. Knew I wasn't going to do it for very long, but when I look back now, I see how all of that ties into the work that I do now and how I manage the customer experience in my own business and what processes I want in place, because that really matters to me. And a lot of that stems from doing that role. So I feel like you can always, everything always ties together at some point. It's just finding the way that it ties together. And you can tie together the
Exactly.
most obscure things.
I know that's why I'm so excited about really the skill of storytelling. I definitely think there are some distinct skills that we need to develop in order to be very successful in the new world of work. And storytelling is absolutely one of them. So, in order to craft a very effective sales page, you need to be a great storyteller. In order to be a presenter, in order to sell yourself to an employer when you're trying to get a job. I don't mean inventing an untrue story. I mean, in the very best way, really thinking about who's in your audience and describing whatever it is that you want to do in such a way that really gets people, engaged and enlivened. And it makes me so excited because I love stories. I've always been a big reader. I love to read books. And I just think it's so neat how it's probably the most ancient way that all cultures around the world have always communicated via stories. It's like going back to the origins of how it is that we used to pass on information before we had the internet, and that just gets me really excited. And I think there's so much possibility when we begin to see it that way for how we can have more fun connecting with people, and most importantly, also how we can be much more effective at getting what we want.
Yeah.
Because when you're trying to get a book deal or get a promotion or, get funders for your business, when you're really focused on how you can create a compelling story, that's really when things happen. It doesn't matter how much experience you have or where you went to school or what you used to do. You always have to be able to convince somebody and get them excited about whatever the next thing is that you want to build.
Yeah, story is so, so important. And
Yeah.
it's really everything. And your story is always the one thing that is going to be unique to you. I mean, there could be hundreds of other people who do what you do, but your story is what is your differentiator and makes you unique and sets you apart. Pam, I want to talk about the F word, fear. What is your relationship to fear? And how
Yeah.
does that play into your body of work?
It's interesting because I'm the kind of person, maybe, being a trained life coach and an eternal optimist, I don't really like conflict. I don't necessarily like to be in scary situations, but just about everything that I've found that I've done in my life has gotten me much more familiar and comfortable with fear. Because, when I was younger and when I was traveling by myself in Latin America, I learned to be in training martial arts, learning how to face really large, sweaty people who were trying to attack me and not freak out about it. And then coaching many, many people in the very scary process of leaving a corporate job in order to start a business. I realized that fear is something that is totally essential to our human experience and to the creative process. And one of the most helpful thoughts that I've really had around fear is that it actually is a protective force. It's Martha Beck, who I train with as a life coach, that talked about in her book, Finding Your Own North Star and Steering by Starlight, that we have the lizard part of our brain that's at the base of our skull that's constantly blasting these messages that there's not enough food and somebody's about to attack us, right? That's what's actually kept us healthy and alive as human beings. So those are protective forces. Those are forces to remind us that we never need to get too comfortable and we need to always be looking for more food, AKA more clients or the next work opportunity. And so when you look at it that way, and fear is an inevitable part of the creative endeavor, get more comfortable with just engaging in it. Sometimes you can engage in dialogue in your own head, right? I'm totally terrified. You're up at 3 o'clock in the morning. You're not sure if your business is going to be a success. Begin to have a little dialogue. Why am I scared? Well, I'm scared because I don't think I'm going to get any clients. Why not? Well, I'm totally uncomfortable with a sales process. I don't know who my clients are. When you begin to identify specific things that are underneath a generalized fear, that's where you can do something about it. So, okay, you can learn how to be a better salesperson. You can learn how to understand your market so that you have more, focus and help. You can hire a coach. You can talk to somebody who's done it before. And those are ways that you can really begin to work through it. But probably the very most important thing that's just been a real shift for me is when I'm sitting on the side of a stage and, for example, in front of, 1,000 people or something, even though I've done so many talks in my life, I always feel fear. And now I don't say, oh man, why are you still scared about this? Now I say, I know I'm onto something, because any worthwhile creative endeavor is always accompanied by fear. If I didn't feel fear, I probably wouldn't be as engaged as I am.
Yeah, I love that. Well, that sounds like a very healthy relationship to fear. So
On
that's
some
great.
days, on good days.
Yeah. Pam, can you leave people with one actionable or activity that they can do as they're planning out the next 12 months of their
Yeah.
businesses and lives? What's something that people can dig into from body of work?
Yeah. One thing is just to ask yourself for 2014, what do you actually want to create? So what are some examples of concrete things that you want to create? I want to design and sell a retreat. I want to create a book. Whatever that is, define the things that you want to create. And then you can choose 3 strategic things that you need to do in order to make that happen. If you really focus your planning on major activities, 3 main strategic priorities for the year, that's going to totally help as you go through the busyness of your life to make sure that you get it done. I'm a huge fan of planning backwards, right? So if you say, all right, next year I'm going to write my book, like that's it, I'm going to write my book, define that, and then plot a time in your calendar. All right, so I'm going to do it. I think I can do it by October 15th. Then you can start to work backwards in stages and figure out what actually needs to happen, right? What do I need to do? Where do I need to start? And most importantly, what do I need to learn in order to be able to deliver on that? And that's how things get done. The biggest thing that I find stops people from getting their dreams, accomplishing their goals, is by putting far too many things on the plate. And so if you really simplify it and you have some main goals that that you want to address, you put them on the calendar, and you start to work backwards. And then you start to use some of the skills, that I talk about in the book. You get really smart and strategic about how it is that you're working with your networks. You look for models of things that people have done more effectively. That's where you get things done. It's been a big game changer in my own life and certainly in the lives of my clients.
I love that. That's a great actionable to leave people with. Pamela Slim, Body of Work. Check this book out. It's awesome, and I know that you're going to find a lot of value in both Pam's story, the stories that she's telling from other people, as well as all of the exercises in the book. So Pam, I'm so happy for you, and this was just fantastic. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today about how people can really use Body of Work to create an awesome new year for themselves. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. It's been my pleasure, and I can't wait to see what you create next year.
Thanks, Pam.